Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Sunday, November 16th, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about the generic congressional ballot. New data showing that the Democratic Party across this country is growing in terms of their advantage over the Republican Party as a large new set of data points come in showing the Democratic Party in this better off position going right into the new year. It's a week or two, rather, after the election that took place that showed the Democratic Party in an extraordinarily strong position in a number of states that they won in the last election, alongside a few that the President of the United States won as well. Democrats ran up their numbers in Virginia, in New Jersey, in New York City, as well as coinciding with pretty substantial flips and retaining elections in states like Pennsylvania and Georgia. But the 2026 elections are quite a ways away. They're roughly 1 year in advance, and the data in the lead up to the 2025 election didn't look all that strong for the Democratic Party, even in the individual race-by-race status. But what you look at on the national stage now is a pretty substantial shift in favor of the Democratic Party, with Democrats now taking an average of a 5-point lead nationwide. Roughly a month ago, that lead was roughly half of what it is today. When you take a look at that data from October 16th, 2025, a month prior to the recording of this video, Democrats led by less than 2 points. In just about, 1 month, you see Democrats gained about 3 points nationwide, enough so to make a certain and big enough impact that it's worth discussing and understanding exactly where both parties stand today. Now, the generic ballot has always been an amazing indicator of, general sentiment in either direction. How well are Democrats doing? How well are Republicans doing? And where does the general populace stand on each political party and who they want to see control the next chamber of Congress? And while generic ballots don't always translate to immediate victories in competitive races or in competitive states, it oftentimes does tell us the general trend line of, what we are expecting for the political parties in the next cycle, and generally tells us how many seats both parties are likely going to get in the next election. Now, the 2024 data was a bit more difficult to understand. By Election Day, the Republicans led on the generic ballot by about 0.3% to go on to win it by about 3 points. It underestimated Republican support quite a little bit. When it came down to the national data, too, you'll see that on the head-to-head between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, the data was down to 0.1%. And while this was only off by roughly 1.5 points, the generic ballot underestimated Republican support ever so slightly. But oftentimes, the generic ballot does underestimate Democratic support, too. In 2018, the data had said the Democrats would win nationally by 7. They did so by nearly 9. And so it really just depends on the circumstance of the year that defines the election, rather than historically comparing, underperformances and overperformances. We can pretty much take a lot of this data at face value, because in 2024, they said the Republicans would win the popular vote. They did. In 2022, they said the Republicans would win the popular vote, and they did. In 2020, they said the Democrats would win the popular vote, and they did in 2018, in 2016, and so on and so forth. And even when you take a look at, the most recent data that's presented to us for 2026, again, in just about a month, the lead for the Democratic Party has gone from sub 2% to now roughly 5 points nationally. And I don't think it's lost on us that a lot of this driving and motivational factor towards the left has been the most recent election cycle, that in every single data point released since then, save the Reuters and Ipsos poll, Democrats have a pretty substantial lead that drives up this average to Democrats being up by 4.6%. And I also think, too, that right at the height of the government shutdown is really where you started to see Donald Trump's approval rating starting to take a bit of a tank. Now, Real Clear Politics doesn't include every single poll that we would like it to, but they did show that, and this is most recent data. I actually want to take a look at President Trump job approval rating, because when you take a look at the average here in terms of how people view Donald Trump, again, it is this government shutdown that really drove him in a negative direction. And with it, a lot of the voters. You can see it better visualized on Nate Silver's website here. It's roughly the same average. It's only about a point off in one direction. But the point is that Donald Trump's disapproval rating number is at a record high of 55% nationwide. Whether you're looking at 50+1, whether you're looking at the Silver Bulletin or Real Clear Politics, they will all agree that the data today is not great with the Republican Party and not great with Donald Trump. And I think that, looking at the next midterm cycle, Republicans have to think about how bad can this get? How bad can the numbers be before they start to see a complete and total collapse by the Republican Party and by the Democratic Party winning over a number of their seats, right? When they look at the Democratic Party, at this point where a year out from the election, they've suddenly gained 3 points nationally in the matter of weeks, practically. They have to ask that question: if the numbers do in fact get worse for Donald Trump, where is their baseline? And does it look like a 2018 type of victory for the Democratic Party, which would be enormously consequential in favor of the Democrats? Because if Democrats are to get that, if you just want to see visually what it looks like on the national stage, a Democratic victory nationally by about, 8.6%, which is what we saw in 2018, you'd be swinging the electorate by roughly 11 points to the left, and Democrats would be at about 242 seats nationwide. It would be tremendously difficult to find Republicans any conceivable pathway to the House majority, and even the Senate could be at risk if that national environment is adhered to across the board. And so that's why when we look at the generic ballot numbers, it really tells us a big story about where this public is going, right? Where the American populace is saying, okay, government shutdown is at its worst case. We know that children are starving across the country, SNAP benefits are on freeze, and the White House and the GOP majority and the GOP Supreme Court is doing absolutely nothing to stop it. And so what you find in every single data point, too, that coincides with many of the numbers here that show Democrats had by 7, 6, 4, 5 points, they also ask the question, which political party do you blame for the shutdown? Which political party do you blame for where the nation is going? When you look at the direction of the country polling too, you'll find that right after Trump's election, it started to narrow quite significantly. Leading into that year of 2025, you're going to see that the numbers really did narrow up. Right at the election, you saw that the numbers were very bad. But the moment that Donald Trump was inaugurated, you saw a 20-point jump practically overnight. Voters felt optimistic, as they do at the beginning of nearly every single administration. But now, they're starting to sour on Donald Trump and the Republicans nationwide, and it is showing, evidently so, in the generic ballot polling. And while Democrats aren't probably not going to get a 9-point national popular vote victory as they did in 2018, I want us to understand what it would look like if the 2026 numbers were held to reality today. Remember, the Republicans won nationally by 2.7% in the last election. Democrats this time are up on an average of 4.6%. You add them together, what do you get? You're going to find yourself in a position where Democrats would swing the electorate by roughly 7.3%. Visually, I'll show you exactly what that looks like compared to last cycle's election. 7.3% puts the Democratic Party at 235 seats. Do you know why that 235 number makes sense and why it really turns heads? Is because in 2018, the number Democrats won then was also 235. When you look at the future elections that are set to take place between now and 2026, those will also be indicators of what is to come in future years as well, right? In the midterms and also the presidential cycle, you have a special election in Tennessee. We're taking a look at what will be a special election in New Jersey, and whatever types of vacancies end up opening up. People oftentimes leave Congress in the middle of their term to take a high-paying lobbying job in Washington, D.C. or whatever it is, right? And so even higher paying than $186,000, which is crazy to think about. But seriously speaking, these are calculus points for members of Congress. There could be future vacancies in the future, right? And I do think that every election we've seen since Donald Trump was inaugurated, from January 20th onward, has shown a substantial shift in favor of the Democratic Party, even in a way that might suggest that this generic ballot number could in fact be off and underestimating Democratic support. And I'm not just saying that to say it. I think that the reason I bring it up is because looking at the polling data in the states of Virginia, looking at the polling data in states like New Jersey, I was being sold on this narrative, which I think many of us were, that a lot of these races were going to be far closer than they actually were. When you took a look at a lot of the statewide races for New Jersey governor, for instance, we were being told Mikey Sherrill was up by 1 point by the best pollster from 2024. Simply could not get the New Jersey race right. They said Mikey Sherrill would be up by 1. She won by 14. In Virginia, in the Attorney General's race, almost every single poll from early October onward, save 2 last-minute polls by the Hill and Emerson College and Insider Advantage, said that Jay Jones would lose to Jason Miyares, in some cases by 8 points. Who said this 8-point number? This was Roanoke College. Horrible number for Jay Jones. He won by 6. In the Virginia governor's race, we saw it as well. Abigail Spanberger was supposed to win by 10. Chances are, by the final count, she may even be up by 16 points statewide. And so while I don't think that there's a guarantee that these data points are underestimating Democratic support, I think it's within the realm of possibility that that might be the case. And should that be the case, these numbers already look terrible for the existing Republican Party and their current strategy. But what comes if Democrats are being underestimated by 3 more points, right? What happens, let's say, God willing, not for the Republican side, Democrats are being underestimated by 5 more points than what actually ends up on Election Day. You know, what happens if Democrats get to that point where they're winning nationally by 10 points, like they did in 2008? You end up with a House majority that is the second largest Democrats have seen in the 21st century. And arguably, too, when you look at it here, the second largest, or third largest, rather, that any party has seen in the 21st century. I mean, it would be unfathomable to take a look at this map and compare it to where we are today by Republican standards, because it would be so detrimental. It would completely wipe them off the face of the planet when it came down to House leadership, when it came down to the ability to pass anything that is, Donald Trump's agenda. The speaker vote would come and go in one round, unlike what we've seen with Mike Johnson and Kevin McCarthy. I mean, you are finding that there is a perfect storm brewing for the Democratic Party, and the generic ballot is catching up to the data that we've already seen in real-time elections. And I think that is, really interesting. Looking at the 2026 elections, looking at what we've understood about them so far, none of it looks good for the Republican Party, but it has been the generic ballot that has been the prevailing factor that has held me back in saying that, this was going to be unequivocally a Democratic wave year. Because prior to this election, even on Election Day, you were seeing that these numbers were growing for the Democratic Party. But in the lead up to it, it was, okay, well, are Democrats just seeing a marginal bump right now? But no, this looks like it very well may be here to stay, and could be that early warning sign for the GOP that, yeah, it's a year out and Democrats aren't up as much as they were in 2018. But if you were to go by that standard a month ago, Democrats would be arguably looked down upon far more by the GOP than they are right now. I think they are finally realizing that there is going to be a really interesting scenario taking place where Democrats are starting to do well across the board in all of these elections, ranging from state, local, municipal, whatever it is, elections across the board. And as Democrats are navigating that and doing so, Republicans are realizing in real time that this isn't just a vibes thing. This is not just people are upset with the White House posting ASMR deportation and there's no effect concretely on any type of election. But there very seriously is a visceral reaction to what the President of the United States is doing, far more than what people say on social media, far more than what people say at a No Kings protest or a protest outside of an ICE facility. It is translating that energy into tangible and very real election results that Republicans feel at their core, that Republicans see true as day in the election results, as much as they're willing to admit that the election results are valid and secure, that the American populace is turning on them. And that's what I think the generic ballot is showing. And I think that, looking at the next cycle too, I really am at a loss on how Republicans have navigated the past 6-7 months since we've come into realization that those April 1st special elections, the first congressional elections that we really saw, where, yeah, every other special election had taken place. There was one in a Pennsylvania state Senate district. There had been some other races. But we thought there might be a change and a turn away from what we're seeing. We thought that maybe in an effort to try to distance themselves from an unpopular president who was very clearly brewing a very unpopular agenda that the American populace, can't talk today, populace was completely turned against from the very beginning. But we thought there might be a change in attitude and sentiment towards it out of a pure effort, electoral effort, maybe not genuine to their core, but an effort to retain their seats. But instead of seeing that, like I think we saw in 2017, 2018, a lot of these Republicans tried to distance themselves from an unpopular president. Obviously, not all of it succeeded. But rather than even try, many of these Republicans are doubling down. What did we just see? Arizona, we talked about this race yesterday. I said Andy Biggs was going to be a gift to the Democratic Party because I did not think he could win statewide in Arizona, even if the polls had said he was down just 1 point. What did he do hours after I posted the video? Obviously, no correlation. But he came out publicly and said that he supports repealing the Affordable Care Act. The approval rating for the Affordable Care Act in the midst of this shutdown has hit a record high nationwide and is at about 65% national approval, meaning that in a state like Arizona, which is about 4 to 5 points to the right of the nation, it stands to reason that approval rating is still in the positive and probably in the high positive. You are finding that these Republicans who have adopted this Make America Great Again mentality, many of them have been propped up by the president in the past, do not feel this electoral need to try to pivot away from it because they know nothing else And they adamantly believe that these data points are wrong, these election results are wrong, and that they can be saved in the 26 midterms. But the generic ballot is telling us the exact opposite story. Just as the fundraising metrics are telling us Democrats are coming into a wave, just as special elections are telling us Democrats are coming into a wave, just as off-cycle, regularly scheduled elections telling us that Democrats are coming into a wave. It is all of these different data points, and it is the generic ballot, again, that I have said consistently pretty often was the one prevailing factor that has held me back from saying it with 100% certainty, but I believe we are on track to see that today. And the data is backing it up all across the board, no matter where you look. And so Democrats today lead the national generic ballot by 4.6%. It's not an amazing lead in comparison to 2018, but it is certainly an improvement from where it was a month ago. And it is something that I do think will help carry Democrats across that finish line, really help drive up, their means of winning and their ability to do so. And I do believe that there's a very real possibility that it is the Democratic Party, not Republicans, who are being underestimated as it stands right now. And Democrats leading by 4.6% is quite interesting, but it could be even more in a year's time on Election Day in 2026. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2026 House election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.